Hi everyone, happy Sunday. It's Janet Wakeland here with Remarkably Created, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with the Timeless Tiles Big Background Stamp tonight. This stamp is one of two background stamps that you can find in the spring catalog on page 45. They're the two stamps that are not shown full size. They do have a little cutout showing you the size of the detail. But just to kind of give you an idea, if you're not familiar with our background stamps, they are designed to completely cover the front of a card, a standard A2 card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 here in the United States. So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for how I work with big, large stamps like this, as well as then showing you some other fun things that you can do to just really kind of bring this stamp to life. So there is a really big clear block that will fit this clear block. But what I've started doing recently with my large background stamps is I 99.9% of the time work with them while they are in the case. I don't put the image on the back. I want it to really kind of be snug and held real good in the case. And there's no reason I'm not gonna, to see that image. So then I just tuck that inside. When it's in the case, I do make sure that I can kind of get my finger in between, that there's a little bit of space here, so that when I am inking it up with color, I'm not going to go ahead and grab that plastic edge. When I am inking them up, I'm going to go ahead and I take my pad, and I'm going to use Versamark because we will be embossing first, then inking later. So you'll see it inked up a couple of different ways. But just right as a quick review in the beginning, I leave it rubber side up. Even if I was using this on a clear block, I leave it rubber side up. The reason being is this is such a large stamp that even if you had just, a stamp this size and you're trying to, hold on to it and pounce it away on a pad, you may not end up getting a really good ink cut coverage. You may end up with ink kind of all around the edges of your pad. So I always ink it rubber side up. And then I grab my paper and I lay it down on top. 11 by 17 grid paper is indispensable in the studio. You just should have a pad of it. I now keep a pad of it also under my computer so I can write little notes during the day when I'm working in the office. And I just go ahead and I give it a good rub. Now you're not going to see much of the image here just because it's just wet on wet, but that's how I work with the larger background stamps on here. Now what we're going to start off doing is we're going to start off embossing. So when I work on embossing, I still always have my space protected by my 11 by 17. But something I've been doing for the last year that I really enjoy doing is using kind of this, it's like an aluminum foil cookie sheet. Has a little bit of a raised lip, and it kind of helps contain the powder just a little bit. No matter how hard you try to get it all back into the container or not blow it off your paper or something, sometimes you're going to have a little bit of dust flying. So it does help a little bit. In addition, if you're doing a lot of embossing, this will reflect some of the heat back up on your cardstock and help heat it a little faster. I just have an old piece of cardstock and you'll see how I use that in just a second. So let's have a little bit of fun embossing with this. We're going to just go ahead and I'm just going to press this pad in. Now let me back up for just a second. You're going to see that this embossing pad is stained a little bit. Because I'm going to be using metallic powders, it doesn't matter that this is stained just a little bit. Or if you were going to use black powder, even white powder over top. If I want clear embossing, I want a nice clean pad. To the point where I spoiled myself with celebration benefits and ordered myself a couple of new clean pads that I'll simply label for clear embossing and reserve them for just that. But because I'm going to be hiding basically the ink with metallic, it doesn't matter that this is stained a little bit. What matters is that it's good and inked up. So always order those refills when you're placing that order. So now let's go ahead and, thought I had a piece. Hold on one second. Well, we're going to do it on crumb cake. It's okay. You get to see a variation this way. Then it works out actually in all of your all's interest. It'll be really good. So we're going to give it a good rub because I really want to get that embossing powder on it. I'm holding part of the half so that the cardstock is not slipping around. I'm kind of feeling to make sure I got the edges. And that's another tip for you. I don't ever start with the exact size piece of paper that I need, okay? I start with a piece of paper that is slightly larger than what I need. That way I'm ensuring that I get all the edges, can cut down, can die cut, do all of those things. So you're gonna flick it off. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a couple of different embossing powders. I have a little bit of a spoon here. And even if you have a jar, you can do the same thing. Just kind of flick it out of the jar, but just a little bit, okay? You don't want a whole lot. And then let's take a little bit of gold. I'm not taking the others off just yet. I'm just gonna kind of come in here in some of the little open areas. And I'm just gonna kind of, let's just catch a little bit more in there. And let's get a little bit of the copper. Some of those fun metallics to play with. I feel like I'm cooking a little bit, or putting sprinkles on a cookie or something. So, okay, so then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of just shake that around and make sure my paper gets covered. I can give it a nice flick on the back just to get any like larger piles off. Now this here I'm not gonna waste, even though I can't separate it back out into gold, silver, and copper. I have a tiny little jar here that I put this in. And then when I want to have a little bit of fun with just kind of like a variegated kind of metallic outline, I've got that extra powder in here so it doesn't go to waste. So it's a little bit of fun. Now when embossing, I like to do something called chase the change. I'm going to start in one corner till I see it start to turn shiny, and then I'm just going to follow it along. I'm not going to stand here and do this because A, it's going to take you twice as long to get it embossed. B, you have a higher likelihood of missing a spot if you stand here and do this, okay? So it's going to get a little noisy for a second. If you don't like sound, go ahead and close your ears. I have it on the high setting. Stampin' Up's heat tool has a high and a low setting. And I'm going to hold it up closer to the camera to see if you can see it start to get shiny on us. The longer your heat tool's on, the hotter it will get. It doesn't go right from 0 to its highest hot temperature just from the flick of turning it on. So in the beginning it may take a few seconds, but can you see it starting to get shiny? And you're going to end up with this really pretty variegated look. I'm not going to put you through the whole thing, but I just wanted you to see that, and I'll show you a finished look on black cardstock. Okay, just look how much fun. And in this case, I know I didn't go all the way to the edges. That's okay. I just kind of wanted that artsy, rough look, as well as I wanted what was in the center. So you can see how much fun that is. Looking again now at other types of embossing. You have embossing just white, and the white on vanilla is actually a beautiful look, but the white also gives you a couple of other options. You can go ahead and you can spritz it with re-inkers, or a nice gentle way to work with it is just like this. Normally I would not be stamping over here. I am blessed in my studio to have some stations. And so I would go over to my stamping station to do this, okay? But I didn't think you guys wanted to follow me around the studio and go back and forth and things like that. So you can definitely have a little bit of fun just kind of starting to add some colors and things. You're going to have that resist and give it a good wipe just to take whatever's off the top. So you're going to be able to add some color to that vellum really easily. So working with it on vellum is a really pretty look. You can do the same thing on cardstock, not just on vellum. You can use your white embossing, and then you can also then go ahead and add a little bit of color in, whether you spritz it Whether you take Stampin' Blends over the top of it, whether you take, not Stampin' Blends, sorry about that, regular markers. Stampin' Blends are permanent, you don't want to do that. Regular markers over the top of it, you take your blending brushes over the top of it, you use daubers, you can go ahead and alter it. Then don't hesitate to play around with tone on tone. Look at this silver on silver. Look how rich this is, guys. I mean, it's just like stunning. It's absolutely gorgeous. Same thing here, playing around a little bit. We've got gold on gold. And I really can't encourage you enough to grab a stack of a 1/4 sheet of cardstock and just play around with your different embossing folders, play around with some different colors. I think sometimes we create with the end in mind so often that we forget to just play around with what we have. In addition, it's a great way to use up that paper you've been hoarding. So this is not just plain vellum. If I hold it up, it's that new layering vellum. And if you were to see this copper up close, you could see that the vellum is slightly broken up a little bit by that greeting underneath. So look how pretty that is. This one I think is one of my favorites. And this is actually on designer paper. If I hold it up real close, I couldn't get that look by coloring it. You're gonna have a very different look when you add color to it. So this is designer paper. So again, just getting out and playing around. Let me show you another one here for a second. This is just ink. This is just Calypso Coral to the cardstock. Okay, real simple, real pretty. And you know what, I've got the Bermuda Bay out, so let's play with that for just a second. The other thing is working with just clear ink. Clear ink's gonna give you a slightly different look than going over the top like we did here. So let's take a look at one that is clear ink. And let's just go ahead. And you notice I'm not stamping off of it. I'm okay with that. I kind of want just a little bit of that shading. So I'm not stamping the sponging brush over. And the amount of pop that you get between the color of cardstock underneath and the color of ink that you're putting on over top, it's going to depend on how dark the ink is going on top, and it's going to depend on what you used for your cardstock underneath. In this case, I used white, and I wanted that contrast. So you can see here the difference. We're really putting that ink kind of down inside, and here we're just being really, really soft. So just something that you can do like that. And let me grab, I want to grab Calypso Coral for what we're going to do next here for a second. So let's bring our stamp back in. Let me make sure I have a piece of paper handy so we can do this. Okay, so I'm going to turn my ink pad upside down. And I'm going to ink up the stamp. And let's close it up so I don't put my hand in it. We're going to lay our piece of paper down, grab our scrap paper. We're going to give that a good rub, and I wasn't quite ready, but I am now. And if your pad is wet enough and you are fairly quick, you are going to be able to emboss this with some clear powder. So I'm just going to sprinkle this on and just kind of, I collect embossing powders over time so that I have a full tub because I like having a big open surface to hit as opposed to those tiny little bottles. So, okay, and let's just take 1 second. It's gonna be a little noisy for just a second, but I want you to see it start to get shiny. When you're embossing, if you find that you are getting kind of like a dead area, you're missing an area, a couple of different things can be happening. One, your Versamark pad can be a little dry. Two, you just didn't get a good coverage of powder. Three, you may not have gotten a good contact between the stamp and the paper. That's why I like to lay that paper over top and really give that a good rub. So you're going to have that nice shiny look. And I'll show you one here that I've been playing with. This whole thing is shiny and it's done in the Pacific Point and yellow. This is actually the colors of my kitchen, and I'm getting ready to make a framed art piece. So you can go ahead and just put, you know, the powder down like that. Now, one other option that you have that's a little bit different. So this was the one that we did earlier that is not embossed at all. But because of the size of this stamp and how you may want to use it, you also can do your embossing this way. You can have it all done, ready to go, and then you can take your ink, your Versamark, and just mush it. We have lots of clever professional terms as Stampin' Up! Demonstrators, right? We're just gonna totally mush it. And now I'm gonna put my, you know, clear powder over it. Get it covered. And the thing is, you want to get your powder on while the ink is still wet, but I can do 3 or 4 and then heat them all at once. You want to get the powder on and then you can set it aside and then re-ink it. So lots of fun that you can be doing with that, whether, you know, it's all the different inks and things like that. But just grabbing that quarter sheet of cardstock, some of those scrap designer papers that you have around, and playing with the different powders. Stampin' Up! Has 2 different sets of powders available in the catalog. And the only thing to remember is that if you want really nice, clean embossing with clear, make sure you have a clean pad. So let's take a look at a few finished samples and some more ideas. So here was one that was done with that resist, our beautiful Fortune, the Crane of Fortune stamps. So just kind of a nice little background on that one. Sticking with the crane, there's the tricolor embossing. And we went ahead and embossed the crane in gold, and the crane was actually embossed twice and stacked one on top of the other and just pulling our vellum back in. I'm really enjoying this vellum, very kind of pretty card. Then if you remember the tile, let's just pull it in here for a second. Nice thing is I can close the lid. The lid does not rest against the rubber, so I won't have ink anywhere. But see these lines? You don't have to use all the squares. You can just use a couple of them. So we just chose 3 of them there. And again, the same concept. You don't need to use the entire background. You can simply use pieces of them. And this flower is also from the Crane of Fortune. So the timeless tiles are going to open up lots and lots of fun doors for you. You're going to have a lot of fun creating with them, whether you emboss them or whether you simply just use them with ink directly. You're going to have a lot of pretty images to be playing with and working with, as well as partial images. So hopefully you were inspired tonight, guys. We'll be back later this week with lots and lots more fun stuff and fun ideas for you. I hope you have great plans for the week, guys. Take care.